The procedure had a reason. The London mob felt cheated of their revenge, and so they treated him almost like a vampire. Williams was buried at the crossroads, so if his tortured spirit emerged, it would be confused and not know which way to go. His body was dumped in a too small pit, so he would feel discomfort for eternity. They also drove a wooden stake through his heart, to prevent his restless soul from wandering. It is not unlikely that Williams was innocent. By the late 1900s, some workmen, digging up the territory, found his remains. His bones were then shared out in the area as relics. His skull, for example, was granted to the owner of the Crown and Dolphin public house, which still stands on the corner of the crossroads, but nowadays it is empty. The church was not lit, so I went carefully past the main entrance and the steps to the right of the church. Someone came out of a side door, and I immediately jumped back and hid behind a piece of wall. Nobody saw me, and I sneaked away. When I walked away, I thought how crazy I had acted, and how weird this appears on CCTV. Definitely suspicious. The way to my next destination, Hawksmoor's Church, St. Anne's Limehouse, is not short, so I looked for bus stop J next to Tobacco Dock. The bus D3 didn't come, so I just started walking. It was almost 7 o'clock. I walked along the highway and Commercial Road, saw on a blue plaque on the highway that James Cook had once lived here in a house, and kept walking until I turned to the right. I approached St. Anne's Limehouse from the front entrance, and I was overwhelmed by the dark Victorian aura that surrounded the church. It was frightening, and the feeling did not stop when I stumbled through the cemetery in the dark. I hoped that no one saw me. A freak that was on a fictional mission that led him through London and formed a pentagram. I was once more bewildered by the pyramid in the churchyard with its inscription, The Wisdom of Solomon. Gull connects the church to the Isle of Dogs, named after the ancient god of the forest, Herne the Hunter, who led the wild hunt, a pack of white hounds with red eyes and ears. The new Billingsgate Fish Market is now located at the Isle of Dogs, of which we already know that its name comes from Belliner's Gate. Alan Moore explains that Ian Sinclair associates the area with the jackal-headed Egyptian death god Anubis, and since ancient images of the goddess Isis have been found along the banks of the Thames, perhaps the Egyptian suggestion is not so strange. I walked away from my old friend St. Anne's and up to Limehouse Town Hall, and at stop LH I boarded the 15 to Aldgate East station. I knew my way around here. I got off and walked up Commercial Street immediately, past the already known begging woman on the same spot, past dubious groups of persons, past tourist girls in search of their hostel and unaware of the area and their surroundings, until I reached my good old familiar friend Christ Church. This church is the geographical center of the Ripper murders. The murders have become a central aspect of the genius loci in London. At least they are the best starting point to travel in any direction in time and space. So we need a short summary of the murders. Jack the Ripper was an undiscovered murderer of at least 5 women in London's East End in the autumn of 1888. The so-called canonical 5 are Mary and Polly Nichols, murdered on the 31st of August in Bucks Row, Annie Chapman, murdered on the 8th of September in Hanbury Street, Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes, both murdered on the 30th of September, Stride in Dudfields Yard in Berners Street, and Eddowes on Mitre Square, and Mary Jane Kelly, murdered on 9th November in Miller's Court, Dorset Street. They were all killed with a throat cut and, apart from Elizabeth Stride, were then mutilated in the lower body parts. The brutality of these mutilations increased with each murder. Whereas the first 4 victims were killed on the streets, Kelly was murdered in her room, where the culprit had enough time to fulfill his perverse desires. Dorset Street, where she was killed, was just around the corner of Christ Church. After this his highlight, he vanished from the scene. Police was clueless, the press reported worldwide, letters from all over the country came in, allegedly written by the murderer, and even Queen Victoria commented on the crimes and the living conditions in the East End. Known as the first serial killer, the Ripper went down in history, and the fascination that surrounds him and his time lasts until today, as we can see here. In the comic, Gull mentions the prostitutes in the area, his future victims, and tells us that prostitutes served as Diana's priestesses. When I left, I pushed myself through another guided Ripper tour. I did not enter the Ten Bells pub where some Ripper victims used to drink, because I knew I would never visit the last station and finish my journey then. Instead, I walked back to Aldgate East Station, had a chat with a homeless fellow who told me he did not want money but needed to charge his phone. I jumped on the arriving bus and promised him that I would be back the next day because I knew I would. The bus took me out of the East End back into the city and straight to the final stop, St. Paul's Cathedral. Gull explains that the pagan times that follows Rome's collapse saw here a temple of Diana, so revered that early Christian monks despaired of ever converting London and complained London worships Diana, and in the suburbs of Thorney they burn incense to Apollo. Thorney is now Westminster. In the Annals of St. Paul's, Henry Hart Milman writes that the church on the site of St. Paul's was demolished and a temple to Diana built on its ruins, while at Thorney, Westminster, rose a kindred shrine to Apollo. On page 5, we also learn that Sir Christopher Wren, during his time, dismissed the fable, as he esteemed it, of the temple of Diana. Gull informs us that in 610, Christian convert Ethelbert of Kent destroyed Diana's shrine and built St. Paul's, a church of Christ, and concludes that Christ is clearly but the sun god's latest guise. He is the Son of God, and that Apollo, Lud, Belinus, Atum, Christ or Baal are all one God. I walked around St. Paul's at least 4 times until I found what I was looking for, the Resurgam sign that Wren had found in the old ruins and incorporated into his new building. Resurgam, I will arise, the motto of London. I sat down on the steps of the main entrance and looked around. I had done it. I was finished. It was almost 9 o'clock, 12 hours. I had taken a tour from hell into the abyss and back, and what had I learned? Let us now unfurl the map on the ground and rule lines between the spots of our journey, just like Gull and Netley do in the comic. Rule a line from Isle of Dogs to Battlebridge, through Christchurch, Old Street, Bunhill Fields and through Northampton Square. Now Albion Drive to Earl's Court, through Northampton Square and St. George, Bloomsbury. Earl's Court towards the Isle of Dogs, through Hercules Road, then through St. John's, Horsley Down. Next, Battlebridge to Herne Hill, through Hercules Road and Cleopatra's Obelisk. And finally Herne Hill to Albion Drive, through Horsley Down, the Tower and Christchurch, Spitalfields. They end up as a pentagram with St. Paul's in the center. Gull finishes his journey through London with the words, "Your destinies inscribed upon the streets wherein you grew, upon the horse you ride each day. Our stories written, Netley, inked in blood long dry, engraved in stone." So that was pretty exciting and pretty exhausting, wasn't it? As mentioned in the introduction, the ideas presented are not mine. I merely demonstrate what Moore and Campbell created and put together. This is how symbolism works. Symbols only work in context. They depend on your own interpretation and on your own story. You read places like the streets of London in the way that they fit your personal story. This journey is part of my book, London and its Genius Loci, A Journey Beyond Time and Place, in which I try to find the spirit of place of this greatest city in the world. A little devil worshipping seems to come naturally when you deal with London. If you ever plan to do this journey, this is a perfect preparation. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something about certain places in London. If you wish to hear more stories and connections, subscribe to my channel, visit my website or buy my book. And if you want to hear something about a special place, feel free to get in touch with me. I'm going to provide you with more London-related content soon. See you around.